Question number 3, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what work it is undertaking to prepare for the introduction of low emission zones in Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Dundee.
Cabinet Secretary.
I meet regularly with the local authorities introducing low emission zones. My officials continue to work closely with them and UK government agencies such as the DVLA to assist with preparations for LEZ enforcement. Extensive national LEZ awareness raising schemes have taken place and continue across both new and traditional media, supported by work at local level by Dundee, whose enforcement starts on the 30th of May, and Aberdeen and Edinburgh, who starts on June the 1st, as these cities join hundreds of other European cities and towns across Europe with similar schemes. And I can also advise that the Scottish Government has provided full funding to establish all local authority LEZ enforcement systems and continues to provide support funding to low-income households and micro-businesses preparing for LEZs, with £16.1 million being made available since 2019.
Alexander Stewart.
The Cabinet Secretary for that response. Almost a year after the low emission zone came into force in Glasgow, 40% of the Council's own vehicles failed to comply with the regulations. Given Glasgow City Council are struggling to comply with the scheme themselves, what support will be given to hard-working Scots and businesses in other locations, or is this simply a war against motorists?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the investment I referred to is £16.1 million, and I know because I checked that the member has membership, I understand, of a number of cross-party groups that are related to lung disease and health issues. So he understands that air quality is very, very important, and it's actually air quality that is the issue here. Now, one of the first lessons of politics is to learn how to count. And if you look at the area in square miles of Glasgow, it is 127 in terms of the area. The area of LEZ in square miles is 1, which the percentage area of the whole of Glasgow City Council area that is covered by the low emission zone is 0.79%. But according to the Conservative, perhaps they expect every single vehicle in all parts of Glasgow to always and all the time be in that 0.79% of that low emission zone area. So I would suspect that in areas perhaps like Outer Pollok or in other areas those vehicles that are not compliant will not need to be compliant to go into that city centre area. But I do think that both Glasgow and indeed all the other areas are looking to decarbonise their fleet, and they're doing it in a phased way. But I think let's be reasonable that with less than 0.79% of the area covered, we are not surely going to expect every single vehicle in Glasgow City Council all to be in that city centre all the time.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. We have a request for 3 supplementaries. I intend to take all 3. First, supplementary from Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Low emission zones take place across Europe, and around 320 cities have them. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what learnings the Scottish Government has taken from the experiences of the European cities whilst developing its work for the introduction of low emission zones in Scotland's cities?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the member makes a very good point. We are not in Scotland the only country in Europe that has created low emission zones, and they are in operation in many countries and cities for a number of years, and of course London. And of course important that we learn from others' experience, and we have met with European cities and government representatives to discuss the LEZ delivery in Europe, and the officials have also reviewed many of the environmental vehicle access restriction schemes in operation across the continent, and that has helped inform the framework used for the Scottish LEZ introduction. Of course, this is normal, and this is something that many countries are doing, and indeed the issue here is improving the air quality, improving quality of life, and improving quality of health for the vulnerable, particularly in our communities, young children, those with preconditions, health preconditions, and also older people.
Supplementary, Liam Kerr.
Very grateful. The Liberal Democrat co-leader of Aberdeen City Council stated in writing that the decision to introduce an LEZ in Aberdeen was taken by the Scottish Parliament, not the City Council. And I asked some time ago if the Council could decide not to enforce the LEZ. I was told it was not possible. Does the Cabinet Secretary think the co-leader's assertions are entirely accurate? And is it correct that where there's been a material change in circumstances since the Council declared an LEZ, legislation does allow modification of those plans?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I would reflect that all the cities that are carrying out low enforcement zone areas, and we're seeing Aberdeen introducing theirs, and in terms of the enforcement, obviously it's been in place for some time. Dundee, Edinburgh, and obviously Glasgow has been in place for some time as well. I'm very struck by the cooperation and the support of those local authorities in doing the responsibilities and carrying out those responsibilities. In terms of modification, it may well be that the Conservatives want to roll back from low emission zones because they don't believe that air quality is important. But if they do want to support the local authority, they can do that. I've not had representations from any of the local authorities to make modifications or amendment. I do know, for example, Glasgow extended the period for taxis to be exempt, so there are flexibilities that can be made depending on the individual circumstances. It's not for me to dictate what they are. It will be up for the council leaders in those particular areas to decide themselves what makes sense for their cities.
And supplementary for Zochaji.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been contacted by many constituents, particularly taxi drivers, whose cars come up as eligible to drive in low emission zones when checked online. However, when they contact their council or their taxi office, they are informed their cars are in reality not eligible. Can the Minister assure me that the Scottish Government is taking action to ensure the information on LEZ vehicle eligibility checking service are accurate?
Cabinet Secretary.
I appreciate the member raising the issue of the tracking and the checking service. It's provided on the low emission website. It's connected to the DVLA and the DVLA's definitions. If there is an anomaly between the two, it's really important that they do contact the councils. There's 1 million people have contacted and used that tracker. As I recall, in the very early days in Glasgow, there were situations where there may have been some, in very few circumstances, discrepancies, and that is definitely worth pursuing because they need to make sure that there's a good read across. But it certainly has been working to date, but I would refer members to that issue, and if they can draw that attention to Transport Scotland as well, that would be quite helpful.